for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Good evening, Fade to Black. Bespoke Radio for the masses. How you doing? Today's Wednesday, August 28th, 2019. 239 days into the new year, just 126 days left. We are live from a bunker somewhere in the middle of beautiful downtown Burbank, California. And I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south. Far and near. This is Fade to Black for KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, the Planet. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking? How you doing? Yeah, you just saw me disappear, but I came back. That was cool, huh? Right? Yeah. All right, continuing our Amazing Women Week here on Fade to Black, Night 3. Tonight, very special guest, Kathleen Marden is here. We're going to discuss her new book, Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You've Been Abducted. It's a great read. You can see that I have read it. This is a good book. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Kathleen Marden. This is our night 3 of our Amazing Women Week here on Fade to Black. And tomorrow night, which is night 4, Dr. Lynn Katai. All right. Let's get out of here. Take our break. When I come back, Kathleen Marden and I are going to talk about her new book. It is right here. I can't wait. It's going to be a great conversation. She is amazing. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Email is jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. On the Game Changer Network and KGRA, the Planet. I'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. This has been our Amazing Women Week here on Fade to Black. Tonight is night 3. Kathleen Marden is here. Tomorrow night, Dr. Lynn Katai. Kathleen Marden, leading UFO researcher, the author of several books, a featured on-camera commentator, and international lecturer. She earned her BA degree in social work and worked as an educator and education services coordinator while attending graduate school. She is a master-level practitioner of the quantum healing hypnosis technique. Her interest in UFOs and contact began in 1961 when her aunt and uncle, Betty and Barney Hill, had a close encounter and subsequent abduction in New Hampshire's White Mountains. She has been MUFON's Director of Experiencer Research since 2011 and is on the board of directors of the Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Encounters, otherwise known as FREE. Tonight, we are going to discuss her new book, Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You've Been Abducted. It is a practical handbook for anyone looking for guidance on how to comprehend, evaluate, and digest alien abduction memories into the framework of life in the 20th century. And her website, of course, is KathleenMarden.com. The links are over at Jimmy Church Radio. I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black, Kathleen Marden. Kathleen, good evening. How are you?
I'm doing well, Jimmy. Great to be back with you.
Yeah, it's great to hear your voice. You know, can I actually say, I'm just going to mention this. It was great hanging out with you at Contact in the Desert. And you hosted I guess you could call it the speakers little get-together, right?
I was there. I was not the host.
Well,
but I was there, and we met and we talked.
Forever. That was amazing. Yes. We sat down. I sat down next to you. I said, Kathleen, can we talk? And you said, absolutely. And we didn't get up for about 45 minutes. And it was just, right. It was an amazing conversation. And I just enjoy hanging out with you. And of course, later on, you were on with us on Fade to Black once again at Contact. But it was just great hanging out with you. I just think you're so dynamic and you've got so much to share, and you are here to help. And I just want to thank you for all of that. And the book is an incredible read. And, I get books all day long, which you can imagine, right? And I read as many as, and this one I couldn't put down. That's the first thing. But if I feel that way, surely the feedback has been positive. What's the feedback been like?
The feedback has been extraordinarily good, very positive. People are more excited about this than any of the other 4 books that I have written. So I'm just thrilled because I wrote this for the benefit of experiencers and for people who love them, and for the general public who is interested in this type of experience.
What? I feel like I just rudely interrupted you.
No.
Okay. Because, and you point this out very clearly in the book, and we talk about it a lot on this show, in that if you have an experience, if you've made contact, or, the next step, an abduction, people don't talk about it. And they don't want to talk about it because they're scared, and they don't want not only to be embarrassed by friends or family, but today in social media, that's everybody's afraid of that, and they don't know where to go, and there isn't any resources, and they don't know what to do because they hold it in, and that's exactly the problem that we have today, isn't it?
It is precisely the problem that people are very fearful of speaking with anyone. They might have attempted to talk to a family member. They might have talked to a friend, and they've been laughed at. They've been ridiculed. They've been told to go see a psychiatrist, or somebody wanted to know what they had to drink or smoke that night. So, we have been covered by a shroud of ridicule with regard to this field, dating all the way back to the experiencers or the contactees of the 1950s, straight up through the Betty and Barney Hill experience and on through Charlie Hickson and Calvin Parker and Travis Walton and on and on and on. It's time for the ridicule factor to drop. This book, I hope, will lead to an understanding of what occurs and will command some respect for the individuals who are having these experiences. Because, not all of them are having contact with extraterrestrials. There are many different reasons for this, but it doesn't need to be presented to ridicule people or to debunk people. It needs to be presented in a way that will help people to come to an understanding of what is happening in their lives.
Is there, this is a very direct question, Is there any resources by the medical professionals out there or the government for somebody that may be having these memories or these experiences? Is there any open doors anywhere?
Well, I have tried very hard to open doors, and in my position as the Mutual UFO Network's director of the Experiencer Research Team. And we are attracting professionals who do believe that this is occurring, and professionals who want to know more about this. I have 2 psychiatrists on my team now who have just recently joined as consultants and who attend our monthly training sessions. There are other professionals who attend the monthly training sessions for my team of 35 compassionate listeners. So it is growing, I believe. You know, Dr. John Mack did his best to educate the medical profession and the psychological profession to the reality of this. But when John was killed, when he was hit by a car in England, there was an end to this. And when I took over as MUFON's Director of Experiencer Research in 2011, one of my goals was to establish a list of professionals who, for referrals, and to educate the professional community to the reality of this experience. And I'm moving along slowly, but I'm very happy that I'm moving forward.
Why is it that society, when we know that the number is potentially in the millions, right, of contactees and experiencers and abductees, that the number is very, very huge. But in a professional sense out there, that they immediately, and I'm talking about the doctors and psychiatrists and professionals that should be here to help and to assist, that they immediately jump on the skeptical side. They don't really want to hear it. They want to put it up to psychosis or drugs or imagination, and that's it. This did not happen, right? That is their stance. There isn't a possibility of it happening. It's an absolute no. It's impossible. It has never happened. Why did they take that position so strongly?
In my opinion, there is something about psychologists that causes them to become far more skeptical than physical scientists. If you look at the studies that have been done periodically over a period of 40 to 50 years, you will find that people at colleges, professors of various fields, have been asked questions about their belief in UFOs, their belief in contact. And always it was the psychologists who were at the very bottom, having the lowest statistics in believing that any of this could possibly be real. Right. The physical scientists believed that it could be, the more than 50%, the majority. But in psychology, there's something about attempting to attribute it to the mind. And those psychologists who are making those statements have not examined experiencers of ET contact, because if they had, they would have been able to realize that these people are rational, they're stable, they're not delusional. Why would they not be delusional about anything in their lives? Why would they hold steady jobs and sometimes in professional positions and be delusional only about this one thing that occurs to them periodically?
And
alien abduction.
That's right. And I think that's the point. And I know I don't jump on, I'm just speaking about myself for a second, Kathleen. I don't jump on every conspiracy. I don't jump on every fantastical thing. It took me years. I'm still on the fence about Bigfoot. I am, right? But I have seen what I have seen, and I've experienced what I have experienced, and I'm about as stable as it gets. And there's no way somebody can look at me and say that I didn't have those experiences. And especially, right? And especially when I've had somebody standing next to me for the, or maybe even dozens, if not hundreds, that we've experienced a sighting together, you cannot say that this did not happen. And I know that the other experiencers out there that want to talk about this have the same story and the same experiences that I do. And that's it. That's where it stops. It needs to be taken seriously, and it is not. It is so frustrating.
Yes, it does need to be taken seriously. But I think that the To the Stars Academy for Arts and Science is moving forward in the direction of acceptability and of presenting accurate information to the public, the mainstream public, on television. And since that article was written on the front page of the New York Times on December 16, 2017, I think that there has been a little bit of a change in attitude. And I am seeing at conferences more interest from academics, for example, and I'm happy to see that.
And they have definitely, and I totally agree with you, they have definitely, it's good to have a good, an endless bank account, right? A checkbook. Because,
nice.
Yeah, right? Because you are able to, get the right marketing, get the right stuff out, produce a good show, elevate the presence. That's something that nobody that I know of in the UFO community is driving a Lamborghini. Do you have a Lamborghini, Kathleen?
No, I do not.
Yeah, neither do I. Right? And so, and I appreciate that. They have definitely elevated it and gotten it out there into the public like never before. And it's very exciting times for that. And the one point that I want to get established here, because we're going to be discussing this throughout the evening, is I want some definitions from you, because we talk about these all the time and probably don't define what we're talking about. And that is, what is an experiencer, what is a contactee, and what is an abductee? What are the differences? And let's start there for you. What is an experiencer? No, let's go on the back end of it. What is an abductee?
Well, the abduction phenomena began in 1961 when Betty and Barney Hill were tracked by a UFO that swooped down over their vehicle and then took control of the vehicle. Betty and Barney removed them from their location to a remote area with tall trees all around, opened the car, and actually kidnapped them. So they were abducted because they had absolutely no intention of having this kind of experience. They were driving home from vacation, and this happened against their will. It caused trauma, and especially for Barney, who had conscious recall of observing the non-human entities. Mm-hmm. And it went on. Travis Walton was abducted. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a pleasant experience. He still carries a little bit of trauma. So many of those early abductees are just that, abductees. And
what's a contactee?
Well, we have to go back a decade from Betty and Barney to the 1950s. The contactees were the individuals who were having benevolent contact with Space Brothers, and even today, this has continued with the contactees who are having contact with individuals who have a human appearance, who are kind to them, who are nice to them, who follow them again throughout their lifetime, but the experience is positive. And even with contactees, we have individuals who have attempted to have benevolent contact by going out on CE5s and having out-of-body experiences, for example, having astral travel to spaceships, that sort of thing. It is benevolent. It's not terrifying to these individuals.
Yeah, so somebody like George Van Tassel, even though he rode on a ship, he wasn't abducted. He voluntarily said, let's go, right? He was invited. Yes. So that would be the difference there. Betty and Barney against their will, Travis against his will, Calvin Parker against their will. A contactee, it's not against their will, number one, and number two, it's a benevolent experience.
Yes.
Okay, and an experiencer, which I love the word. Somebody, are you ready for this? I got into an email spat about 2 years ago. I had said experiencer on Coast to Coast, and I got great. That's not a word. You can't use a word that's not a word. I said, what do you mean it's not a word? Experiencer. I love it. Okay, what's the definition of experiencer?
Well, I love it too because John Mack coined that term. And I think that it is an excellent term that encompasses both contactees and abductees into one group. So you don't have to think about what word you want to call somebody. You can just call everyone an experiencer. But those people who are abductees, who feel that they are entitled to their own opinion about their own experience. And I do not agree with those individuals who want to call them contactees. Likewise, those who are having positive contact don't want to be called abductees. That it simply doesn't fit. So, I'm a stickler on that kind of thing. Because people have called Betty and Barney contactees, and they certainly were not.
And your comments that you just made about against their will and professionals, employment, and what happened after that, and ridicule, and what people go through. You went through that firsthand with your aunt and uncle Betty and Barney Hill, and you're not making these comments off the cuff or from stuff that you've read. Your family went through all of this, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
With
indeed.
How bad was it? I mean, when on the worst of days, how bad was it?
It was very bad for Barney. Not so for Betty. She was very, very curious. She wanted to learn more. She wanted to learn as much as she possibly could. She talked incessantly about this. She became fixated on it, just really wanting to have the answers. For Barney, he wanted to suppress this. He wanted to push it down. He didn't want to talk to it. And when Betty and Barney would come to my childhood home on weekends, I grew up across the street from my grandparents, Betty's parents, and oftentimes when Betty would start talking about that event, Barney would simply leave the table and go outside and walk on the back lands of the farm. he was attempting to avoid those memories. He was deeply disturbed by his conscious recall of observing those non-humans, the feeling that he was going to be captured is the word he used, there as he observed them, making some kind of preparation to capture him and run screaming back to his car, and then having the series of buzzing sounds striking the trunk that caused the tingling sensation through their bodies, caused the car to vibrate, and then finding themselves 35 miles down the road as if only a moment had passed, with very little recall of what had happened in the interim. And then the evidence when they arrived home, physical evidence, the torn clothing, the scraped shoes, the shiny magnetic spots on the trunk of the car, the watches that had stopped running, the broken binocular strap. So many things that were so disturbing to Barney.
And things really haven't changed today in the way that people have to deal with it. You're still going to be terrified if it's a bad experience. You're not going to want to go public with it. And if you do, it's the things you are going to face are the same things that so many have faced in the past. And to me, we've gone through 3 or 4 phases of public perception, because in the 50s with the contactees, the public, there wasn't that much ridicule. As a matter of fact, there was more fascination about the subject, and it felt like it was okay. The 60s, it changed radically, and by the time the 70s came around, there were a lot of abductions in the 70s, and it was a very, very harsh experience. And what was going on in the 70s was the exact opposite of what was happening in the 50s, and you would have thought that the public perception of it would have been more sympathetic and more understanding, but it wasn't.
No, it wasn't, because the government was intent upon suppressing this information. And there were individuals such as Philip Klass, who read his first book on contact and UFOs in 1966, John Fuller's book, Incident at Exeter, and immediately decided that he needed to do something about this. And according to him, but the backstory to this is that he was under suspicion by the federal government of espionage, and they were following him. He was associating with a man from the Russian embassy, and he was followed in a boat. He was followed in social activities, and he knew he was being followed. He even contacted the FBI and said, "I know you're following me." They even searched his apartment. I suspect that they offered him the opportunity to save face by doing a job for them. I can't think of any other reason why he would do that. And I wrote about this in Fact, Fiction, and Flying Saucers. I received all of this information at the American Philosophical Society in Philadelphia, where Philip Klass's files are, where Dr. Donald Menzel's, the other debunkers, correspondence files are, Ed Condon from the scientific study of UFOs, and Robert Lowe, who was the project coordinator of all of that. They were all buddies.
Man, that's a blacklist. That's a blacklist right there. That's a blacklist.
And they were all working together.
They certainly were
on this, and there was a concerted effort to call into question the sanity of the individuals who were having these abduction experiences. There was a concerted effort to build a fantasy story around the real story, filled with conjecture, filled with speculation, in order to confuse the public and remove their interest from this topic.
Let's take our break right here. Our guest tonight, Kathleen Marden. We're discussing her new book. It is called Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You've Been Abducted. Continue this conversation when we come back. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network. KGRA, The Planet. Stay with us. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. You can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. The links for Kathleen's new book, holding it up, Extraterrestrial Contact, are over at jimmychurchradio.com. You can click right there. Head over to Kathleen's website where you can get your own autographed copy. I want mine autographed. You know what's funny? When I saw you at MUFON last month, I said, I should have brought my book. You should have signed it. But I want to talk about Matt. And the reason why I want to talk about Matt, first off, it's an incredible, from start to finish, it is an incredible story and journey that needs to be talked about. But the other part of it is a definite warning for those out there that want to go out and maybe meet something. Be careful what you wish for, because that's exactly what Matt wanted. Now, let's start from the beginning. How did you meet Matt?
Matt had gotten in touch with me in 2014, and he was wanting to talk to me about his UFO experiences. And I was extremely busy, as I am now, and so I referred him to a colleague on MUFON's Experiencer Research Team and asked him to speak with him. And come to find out, Matt did not speak to him. He thought that he might be ridiculed again. Matt had seen me on television and thought that it might be safe to talk to me about his experiences. Well, he tried again in 2015, and I did have time at that point to speak with him, to help him to sort out what was going on. He was very confused, and his story began in 2010. He was a commercial pilot who had retired and was operating a business at a small airport in the Southwest. And he, one night, heard people outside the hangar, outside the apartment that he was living in up next to the hangar. And so he went outside to investigate. And when he arrived, there were a few people standing around pointing at the sky. And they were saying, "See the UFOs up there." Matt had never seen a UFO before and had no interest in the topic. And he said that it was the purest, brightest white light that he had ever seen. And it caused him to develop an interest in UFOs. And he decided to try to call in craft. And so he had a control tower. He went up in the tower, and he started attempting to call in UFOs using laser pointers and other things. And eventually he did see another UFO that came in, and he had the desire to sit down and have a nice conversation with them, to ask them what they were doing here, to learn about them, and to tell them about what life on Earth was about. He was completely ignorant about this topic. And they did land, and then they started to take him.
Yeah. Let's. He did a couple of interesting things. He's got an airstrip at his disposal. That's the first thing. He's got a hangar. He's got a control tower. He lives there. So he builds instructions, right? Lights and arrows. X marks the spot. He builds a landing, right? He went through great lengths to try to attract them. It kind of reminds me of the whole cargo cult aspect of this, where you'll do anything you can to get them to come back and to attract them. And that's exactly what he did, didn't he?
That is exactly what he did. But when they came back, and they came back time and time again, and they started to take him, he changed his mind. He wanted to end it. And then he was driving around the airport on a four-wheeler with a gun and started shooting at them. He called the Mutual UFO Network at that time, and there was a field investigator who went out and actually did observe a craft in the sky. So I was pretty intrigued by that when I began this investigation, because I knew about MUFON's involvement in this. And as time went on, things were becoming more and more difficult for him. He ended up chaining himself to the wall in a room where he had boarded up the windows when he went to bed at night to try to prevent them from taking him. One night he found himself a couple of miles down the road, dressed only in his underwear. Another night there was one that came into his bedroom, and he had a pistol, and he shot it, and it disappeared in a blinding flash of blue light, and it left a yellow substance on the floor and the bed, foot of the bed, and bullets in his closet door and through his clothing.
Let's stop right there for a second, because things at this point sound pretty crazy. This is nothing compared to what happens next for him. And let's back up now. You were sent literally thousands of files from Matt of photographs that he had taken of lights. And you had to go through, I've done the same thing too as well. I know exactly what you went through. And you wrote him back and you said, send me the best that you've got, right? Send me your top 10. And so he sends you a few more dozen, right, of his best shots.
That's correct.
But a couple of these shots, and one of them is in the book, by the way, stood out, didn't it?
Yes, it absolutely did, and it had also been published in a local newspaper in his area. So it did stand out. It looked like it could be a landed UFO, and it had the right colors.
Yeah.
I had different photo analysts look at it, and they had differing opinions, but the colors were the thing that really stood out as being highly unusual.
And I want to specifically talk about that moment, because he, again, hears something, sees something, walks outside, and he describes it as a hot dog bun, right? I thought that was very. We always hear cigar shape or whatever, but he says it looked like an 85-foot hot dog bun.
Yes, that was one of the crafts that landed on his property.
Now, tell me, when he walked up to it and touched it, how did he describe it?
He said that it was very smooth and very glossy, and there were no seams, there were no nuts or bolts or anything that he could identify as coming from our planet and using our technology.
He tried to get inside. That's what he was trying to do.
He would have been crazy to do that, but
he was trying to get inside. And so he walks around the entire craft. He said it looked like glass, right? And he walks around, can't find a door, can't find anything. And then he finds out that it wasn't even, he thought it was sitting on the ground, and it wasn't. It was actually hovering. And he runs inside to get his camera, right thing to do. What happens next?
By the time he got outside, it was gone.
Incredible.
So that was that.
Incredible.
But there were others that came as well.
Now, what he probably did, and this is where the warning comes out to everybody, he may have had some kind of benevolent experience in the very, very beginning, but it seems that he might have opened up a portal or maybe some type of directional beacon to anybody to come down to that point. Was that the mistake that he made?
That was the mistake that he made, because he eventually began to have experiences that I can only compare to the Skinwalker Ranch. Time slips, seeing ghosts, and having what appeared to be demonic activity.
He describes, his encounters, and all you can think of is he is being visited by all kinds of interdimensional beings and entities from across the spectrum. Everybody was coming by for a visit.
It seemed that way, and when he told his family, they thought he needed psychiatric help. And he said to his mother, just give me a chance to prove this is real. And she agreed to do that, and she stayed with him, and she did see some of this. And one of the things that she saw was looking out on the airport, and where there should have been a runway, there was a grassy savanna with mammoths grazing. So there is a time slip. And that was occurring at the Skinwalker Ranch as well. There's something that is occurring where these portals are not only interdimensional, but they seem to be able to move back in time.
And there
maybe in forward, too.
Yeah. And there was, I have a very... very advanced laser pointer, right? I have you can imagine what I have, right? I've got one of those. And he used his, and he was, he I don't know how to explain this, because I think laser pointers are needed if you're going to be doing a sky watch and you're looking up at the sky and you see an object in your night vision, but nobody else can see it. Well, you can locate it and show everybody else where to go and look with the laser pointer. We do it all the time. It's one of the tools when you do a sky watch with a group of people. You need to have it. Well, he was just out there going willy-nilly with the laser pointer, and he kind of got slapped, didn't he?
Well, he was informed in a way that they did not want him to be projecting his laser pointer into their craft.
He got warned.
Yes, he was warned.
And it was because of his inexperience in the UFO community. He didn't know he was just out there trying to figure this out on his own.
Yes, he was. And whenever he would report it, an investigator would come out. But over time, he had run out of investigators. The UFO investigators were saying, well, this is paranormal. The paranormal investigators were saying, well, this is UFO. And he was left essentially alone with his family and with his friends, but a lot of his family was becoming isolated from him as well. They just didn't want to be near what was occurring in his life.
What was his demeanor like when you met him? Did he seem stable, or was he pretty freaked out?
Oh, I would say that he was not mentally ill. I could say that. I saw no sign of mental illness, but at the same time, he was freaked out. He had a high level of anxiety.
And how did it end?
Well, it ended in a very unfortunate way because it came to the point where he simply abandoned his business. One night, there was a UFO that landed outside the hangar. There were men working there with him. They went outside. He touched this craft, and it ejected some type of substance that sprayed all of the men. He immediately went into decontamination, took his clothes off, took a shower. The men ran away and never returned. He had no one to work with him now. His wife had left him. His workers had left him. And eventually it became so bad that he simply abandoned the business that he had invested so much money in. He walked away hoping that that would save his life, because when he was attempting to drive away repeatedly, he would become extremely ill and would have to return every time. And he thought that it was demonic activity that was causing this illness. In fact, I did call in a very well-known paranormal investigator, and we were going to go there with cameras. It was adjacent to a Native American reservation, and we had permission to go there. We were planning the trip when Matt passed away, unfortunately.
It's an incredible case.
It was an incredible case.
Just incredible from top to bottom. And I've racked my brain. Anyway, I'm just wondering if I've ever met him, and he's no longer with us. He's somebody that I would have loved to have reached out to. He needed to speak, and he needed to get this story out there. And I think it stands as a pretty good warning. You need to really know what you're doing with stuff like this, and he unfortunately didn't. And what went from UFOs, I think, turned into something else that was completely out of his control. Yes,
absolutely.
Now, there's another case here that, again, I didn't know anything about, which is the young couple that got separated. I think you're running with pseudonyms here, right?
Yes, I am.
So it's Janet and what's the boyfriend's name? Where they were out, they were teenagers and got abducted, and she moved to a southern state and was separated, and then right?
Yes. And now I know what you're talking about. They worked at a summer camp on Long Island, not Long Island, on Lake Champlain in Vermont, I believe it was. and she was older than he, and she was the swimming instructor and the lifeguard, and he took care of the equipment along the edge of the lake. And one night, this was a swim camp, and all of the kids went to a swim meet. And it left the two of them and just a few people around the camp. And they were out on the pier, just looking out as night fell, and suddenly they saw what we could only think of as a mothership that came in and released smaller craft.
They describe it as like an orange ball or a red ball.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and the craft, one moved in one direction, and one moved close to them. It ascended into the air, it descended, plunged into the water as they watched it, and then it moved through the water and rose up very, very close to them. And he could actually see inside this craft and described what looked like frogs wearing goggles looking back at him. And there was telepathic communication that they were there to do no harm. And the young woman at the time just sort of lost consciousness. He then lost consciousness as well. And the next thing they knew, they heard the voices of the kids returning from the swim meet. They were still down where they had been. Several hours had passed, and they were disoriented. They remembered parts of what happened. There were witnesses who did see the craft leaving, and they held on to this story for many, many years until the young man reported it to Walter Webb. Walter Webb was a highly esteemed UFO investigator. He was the investigator on Betty's and Barney's case. He worked with Alan Hynek. He was an astronomer at the Hayden Planetarium in Boston, and he investigated this case. He tracked down Janet and brought her up. She came up and she met with the young man. They underwent separate hypnosis sessions, and they remembered finding themselves on tables in a craft. The same story we hear over and over and over again. The scenario is pretty much the same with a certain group of entities. And Janet had gone on to college. She lived in the southern states. She was worked at a college, and the young man had sort of done many different things in his life, and including having repeat experiences. Very, very interesting case.
Fascinating case. And I like the aspect about this where there's a 10-year separation. She moves to a southern state. They haven't communicated, and Webb was able to locate her and bring her back, do the separate sessions, and then have everything line up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's an incredible case. And the one part about it for me that stands out is his last memory was she fell unconscious. He was falling unconscious, and he just wanted to protect her. And that was the last memory, was him phasing out. She's gone. She's out. And he covers her up, and the last memory that he had was the ship rising out of the water. And then that's it. And then they went and did their sessions 10 years later. Let's take our next break right here. Our guest tonight, Kathleen Marden, discussing her new book, Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You've Been Abducted. It is a handbook, and you can get it at KathleenMarden.com. This is Fade to Black. I'm yours, Jimmy Church. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Kathleen Marden. Night 3 of our Amazing Women Week here on Fade to Black. Talking about her new book. It's a handbook. It's a practical guide. If you think you've been abducted, it's called Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You've Been Abducted. It's a great read. I highly recommend it. And Kathleen, now what I want to talk about here is what you should do if you think something strange has happened. That's what the book deals with specifically. And I want to talk, the reason why I want to go here is you had an experience. Oh, by the way, you live in Florida. You've got a hurricane coming your way. I hope that you're safe, you're prepared, and you're good to go. I want to point that out. And you document an experience that you may have had while driving in South Florida. And this is a perfect situation for anybody it's like the telltale signs, right? That's exactly what it is.
Yes.
And so let's talk about what you should do and what those warning signs may be. And we'll start with your drive in South Florida. What happened?
Well, Denise Stoner, my father, and I had driven down to Tampa, St. Pete area for a MUFON meeting. It was on a Saturday, and Paula Harris was there to speak to the group. And Terry Ling, you might be aware of her.
Sure.
From MUFON's board of directors, and she was hosting the meeting. So we went to the meeting, and we went to a little takeout kind of restaurant after that. I wanted to get home, so we left before anyone else. We just finished our food and then left. And the first thing that happened was I had my GPS set to drop Denise off at a location that's halfway between my house and her house. And so my GPS started malfunctioning, and it was telling me to drive off the road. And when this first happened, I actually did and realized that, gee, I shouldn't be here. So I turned around and got back on the highway, and I was driving along, and she and my father and I were having a great, exciting conversation when all of a sudden she and I felt kind of an experience as if we were going up a hill. But there aren't any hills in that part of Florida. And then we kind of had the experience that we were coming down again. And I didn't realize she was having that experience at the time, and she didn't realize that I was. I just thought to myself, I must be really tired.
Right.
And this is a perceptual kind of thing. And all of a sudden, my father was sound asleep. We went from an enjoyable conversation to him being sound asleep in the back seat. And we just drove on to that point where Denise had parked her car, and she got out. And when she did, she discovered that her cell phone that had been fully charged was now dead. And she got into her vehicle. I had my flip phone that had been turned off the whole time, and that was working. So she called her husband and said that she would be right home. And she got into her car, and the dashboard started malfunctioning. Also, she was wearing an insulin pump at the time, and that started buzzing even though it had a full battery when she wore it that afternoon. So she headed home, and all of a sudden she found herself in a new location on the other side of a lake that she was passing in a kind of a quiet, almost desolate neighborhood. And there she remembered that something had happened. She had a vague memory of a fiery orb rising up out of a lake and observing a non-human entity who was familiar. She called me the next day, and she was very concerned about this, and she was going out with a friend who was another.
Oh, we just lost Kathleen. Just like that. Kathleen, are you there? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Okay, that was bizarre.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Okay, I can. Thank goodness.
What was that?
I don't know what that was, but it's a good thing that I'm back.
Okay.
So anyway,
I'm going to leave that. I'm going to leave that. It's not going to get edited out. I'm going to leave that. That was magic. Okay, so we left off. Denise, the next day, she called you, very concerned. Let's pick up right there.
Okay. She was going to go out with another MUFON field investigator to investigate that area to see if she could remember more. So they went out there, and they did their investigation. Also, the investigation of Denise's car with a tri-field meter. And there was a strong electromagnetic field, an anomaly in that area of the vehicle. So I made arrangements for Denise to come to my house, and I would hypnotize her. But before that could happen, the following night, I had something happen at my own house that was very perplexing. I woke up with a start, with messages being downloaded into my head. And it was coming very, very rapidly. And I went to get out of bed because I wanted to write this down, and I discovered that I had been injured. I had a head injury. The side of my head was extremely painful, and I couldn't turn over in bed. I had a back injury. My hip was sore. And so I decided simply to remain in bed, and the next morning I was still in a great deal of pain. I ended up eventually having physical therapy because of it. So that caused me to question what had happened that night. And I said to my father, I think I had ET contact last night. And my father, who was living in a small house next to mine, my guest house, said, I think we did too. I saw an unusual light outside my window. And so finally Denise came over, and I saw the anomaly on her dashboard. We had the tri-field meter. We set it down on the kitchen table, my dining room table, and we tested the ambient environment. And then we walked away with it from it because it kept buzzing, but it eventually would drop down to where it should be for the ambient environment. And we were then about a dozen feet away from it, and when one of us would step toward it, it would spike again and buzz, indicating a very, very strong electromagnetic field, but stronger on the electrical range than on the magnetic range.
Interesting.
This happened a few times, and so I was perplexed, and I called my husband in, and I said, Charlie, we're doing an experiment. I want you to walk toward that tri-field meter and tell me, and so that we can see what happens. I think it's malfunctioning. And he walked toward it, and nothing happened. In the end, Denise went home, but we did hypnosis. But Denise did go home, and she tested it out on her daughter, on her husband, and on her neighbor. And none of them had the same reaction with this tri-field meter that Denise and I had on our bodies. I hypnotized her, and she remembered a lot of what she recalled consciously. And she also remembered when she was on the craft, passing by a room. She was being escorted rapidly by, so she couldn't stop and look into this room. But she saw a woman who was not facing her, but this woman was wearing what seemed like a necklace or a scarf around her neck. That happened to be what I was wearing that night when we had this strange experience while driving. And she did recall an elderly, balding man next to this woman, which would perfectly describe my father. I don't know for certain if it was us or not, but we were just sitting there on a bench. As she passed by, they took her in briefly. She thought to insert another implant into her, and then they released her. And my father and I, strangely, arrived home later than we had anticipated that night, too. And then she hypnotized me, and under hypnosis, I remembered waking up when I was dropped on a table in this craft. And I was on my side when I was dropped, and I came face to face with a small gray entity. It did not look like a sentient being. I thought that it might have been bio-robotic. It had a very round, large head and a very flat face. There were eyes that were outlined in silver that appeared to be metallic. I did not notice a nose, I don't think, and just a little upturned mouth as if it had been penciled there. I was injured, and the entities who were down at the end of the table said that was an accident. And I remembered him saying, well, she's a troublemaker, isn't she? See, I was writing a book on Denise's experiences.
Well, he got that part right.
The alien abduction files.
He got that part right.
Yes, I guess they did get that part right. I guess I am a troublemaker for some of them. And
Now, for those that are listening to you recounting this incredible drive in Florida, and they're going down the check marks, right? Well, I've had that happen. Okay. At what point should somebody reach out and try to figure out what may have happened to them? Because it may not be a fully remembered, memory. At what point should somebody go, okay, you know what, this seems a little strange here. We need to look into this.
Well, I always recommend that people write what happened in a journal immediately, because you tend to lose memory over time. I always write everything that I can remember immediately, and that's what I recommend to people. I had done that the following morning. But if they've had this experience, they might remember more about it. They could give themselves a little time. If it is bothering them tremendously, if they are feeling anxiety over it, or if they are feeling they've been traumatized by it, I would recommend that they make an appointment to see a professional who can help them. And they can go to the Mutual UFO Network, scroll down to Experience or Research Team on the main page at MUFON. They can click on the little icon that will let them have a conversation to tell their story privately to a member of my team, and my team of very compassionate, caring listeners. And they click on that. It will take them to my team's page, and they click at the top of the page. It says Experiencer Questionnaire. It's a 30-question questionnaire. Click on that. You don't have to give a lot of information about yourself. You don't have to worry. Your conversation is private, and complete that questionnaire. If it doesn't matter what you score, you could score 5 points, and this could be your first abduction or contact experience. You could score 15 to 20, and you could have been contacted over and over again. So don't think you have to score 30 points. You don't. In fact, you shouldn't. So that will open up a conversation with a member of the team, and they will talk to you and give you support, help you to come to some kind of understanding. And if you feel that you want to see a trained professional, either a licensed psychotherapist who does hypnosis, or even if you have post-traumatic stress disorder, EMDR, desensitization therapy, where you will actually remember a great deal about your experience, having that type of therapy, you can make the decision who you want to go to. You will enter into a private relationship with this individual for pay. MUFON doesn't have funding, and nobody does this for free for the Mutual UFO Network. So you enter into a private relationship. You don't have to say another word to that person who you talk to at MUFON unless you want to. But I hope that you will say thank you for helping me. And if you're not traumatized, if you are only curious about what happened, we have a list of hypnotherapists and also quantum healing hypnosis technique therapists as well.
In the book, which I thought was fantastic, it was a great approach, you do a questionnaire after each chapter. And I thought this was a really great and original approach to do this. I'm holding some of them up to the camera. There's a questionnaire right there. Great way to tackle this. What made you go this way?
I wanted to help people. And it seemed to me that the best way to help people was to have them read a chapter on a certain topic and then go to the questionnaire afterward and to answer the questions. It would help them to maybe come up with more information than they had previously remembered. It would help them to assess how they feel about what is occurring, and on and on and on. Each chapter has its own questionnaire, and some of them are scored so that you can score your number of points and you can find out what category you're in and what you should do.
Be careful what you do here, everybody. I went through my questionnaire, and Chapter 3 is really good. We're going to talk about this after the break. How to investigate your own contact experiences. And then you've got a checklist in here, tools and ideas and how to go through it. I'm holding all this up to the camera. It's a great book, and it's really well written. And we'll talk about that after the break. What I want to ask you about here, in the Davis-Wilson leaked documents that came out a couple of months ago, on page 15, the last page of the documents, this is with Dr. Eric Davis and Thomas Wilson, the Rear Admiral. And on page 15, Thomas Wilson says he talked to Gansler in January 98 about my June 97 meetings. This was at the Pentagon. He was briefed by someone. It surprised me. Eric Davis says, what did he say? Admiral Wilson responds, UFOs are real. So-called alien abductions, not real. Gansler said this. Now, I think a lot of the UFO community, in looking at these leaked documents and reading that, were taken aback, including myself. When you hear this kind of statement, is this misdirection coming from the government because they don't want to talk about the abduction phenomena? Why would they say UFOs are real and alien abductions are not?
Because they don't want to address the issue of alien abductions or contact, because militarily they are helpless. They cannot prevent this from happening. And if you will notice, those representatives from the government who are speaking now are talking about robots, artificial intelligence, manning this craft. They do not want to address the issue of contact with sentient beings.
Are they, I totally agree that they can't do anything about it and probably never will be able to. They're far too advanced. We don't have a way to confront this. But are they aware of it and know that it is going on? Is this something that they are fully educated on?
They are. And a military man told me that. And he was aware of my own contact experiences. And I was flabbergasted when he told me that. But it was before I'd ever spoken about it. So, yes, he said, we know a lot more than you think we know.
How many, I know that this question gets, asked a lot, and we wonder about this. But when we look at, the different polls that have been conducted and the way, if we look at ratios, and there's 7.5 billion people on this planet, what kind of number are we actually looking at here? Is it a crazy large number?
Well, some people think that it's between 2 and 4% of the population of the world, which is a crazy large number. I can tell you that my team at MUFON receives up to 150 questionnaires each month from people who are seeking assistance.
So that just at MUFON, a direct response is over 1,000 per year.
Yes.
Closer probably to 12, maybe 1,500. How many of those? That's a big number. That's an astounding number. How many of those follow through after reaching out to MUFON?
We don't keep track of how many follow through to see a therapist. That is something that they enter into in a private relationship. If they want to share it with us, with that person that they've worked with, that's fine. But I insist that all of this remain confidential.
And I respect that. It would have to be that. Okay, so let me ask you this then, Kathleen. If you were going to make a guess, how many people follow through?
Probably less than half.
Less than half. Yeah, that's our society today. That's it. Let's take our break right here. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Kathleen Marden. We're talking about her book, Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You've Been Abducted. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Kathleen Marden. Tomorrow night, Dr. Lynn Katai joins us, The Phoenix Lights. We're talking about Kathleen's new book, Extraterrestrial Contact, and you can get your own autographed copy. Just go and visit Kathleen at her website. The links are at jimmychurchradio.com. Now, Kathleen, I'd like to switch gears. How do we investigate? How do we actually investigate our own abduction?
It's really important to do that. And the first thing, as I mentioned earlier, is to keep a journal and a pen by your bedside to record all of your memories immediately. Also, make sure you have a camera in working order because after you've had this experience, you should go before a full-length mirror, strip down, and examine your body. See if there are any unusual patterned marks on your body. I'm not thinking about a bug bite or a puncture wound. I'm thinking about patterned marks, and I'm not going to tell you what they are. But we, on my team, keep a photo album of marks that we have collected. And you can send that photograph to the person on the ERT that you speak with, and that person can compare them to the other photos in our collection. So to let you know if we have something that looks like that.
How often does that happen? Does that happen a lot where you're looking at something and you go, oh, well, here we go?
Well, yes. I find the most unusual pattern marks in photographs on people's bodies from different states. These people don't know one another. They've never seen these marks before, and yet I'm receiving them from different people.
Incredible.
Pretty amazing.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about the old-fashioned scoop marks. These are pretty elaborate.
Right. And I like, and again, keeping everything like this, it keeps I'm just going to say it keeps the hoaxing out of it, right?
Yes, and it keeps the scientific value in it.
That's right. That's exactly right. Okay, so that's number 2, photograph your body. Number 3.
If you have a UV flashlight, go into a dark room, again strip down, and examine your body with the flashlight to see if you have any patterned fluorescent marks on your body. Now, things like oils and soap residues can cause fluorescence on your body as well. but these would be patterned marks that you'd be looking for. And if you see those, take your camera without a flash and photograph those marks, and also send those to the person on MUFON's experience or research team that you're working with. And if you don't have a UV flashlight, I recommend that you get one. I was able to pick one up at a flea market for $5. I also have an extremely expensive one that doctors use, but to begin with, the $5 one will work just fine.
Number 4.
Get an electromagnetic field detector or a tri-field meter if you really want to get into this, but then you might get to the point of obsession, and so it might be dangerous for some people. I know that if you, for example, have a game camera, an infrared game camera that is motion activated, and you set it up in your room, and you have to check that tape or that disc every morning after you think you've had an experience, you could become obsessive about it. So that's probably not really healthy to do. But if you have an interest, you can certainly purchase those items, and they can be more expensive.
I don't know if I want, I don't know if I want to see something happen in my room while I'm sleeping. Right? I don't know if and I'm being serious here, that some things this is me personally. I don't know if I want to know that, because it happens, it does, but then you go and you see it. Oh no!
But Jimmy, what I find is one of two different things happens. People who are awake and they have a cell phone with a camera or a smartphone, an iPhone, have been able to capture photographs of non-humans in their room and orbs in their rooms that they can see with the naked eye. So that is of value in some cases. The other thing that I have seen happen in cases is that the camera shuts down. But in one of those cases, the experiencers were back-to-back. This is a couple. The man is looking in one direction toward the bedroom door. The woman is looking in the other direction out the window. They see light outside the window. And then suddenly that camera shuts down for 2 hours and 11 minutes. And the next thing that you see on that camera is the woman is in motion, almost as if she's being slipped into her bed under the covers. And the man is now lying down on that bed.
You bring up the sleep paralysis aspect of this. I think so many of us go through it. I have. And I want to address that for a second. You spent some time on this in the book too, as well. What do we do when we experience sleep paralysis?
Well, your body is simply out of sync with your REM sleep, and so you're half asleep and half awake, but you're still for sleep paralysis. You can see shadowy figures. You can feel very, very fearful during this experience, and it's perfectly normal and natural. Many humans have sleep paralysis. Normally, if you see something hovering above you, it's going to be geometric shapes, or it might be a disembodied head, or something like that. It is not a complete experience. And in a very short period of time, your body will catch up with your brain, and you will be out of it. But in that time where you're having that, you're in REM sleep and you're still paralyzed. You're able to move only your eyes.
And I went through a couple of nights here on the show, open lines, where we discussed one phone call after another about sleep paralysis. And I know what I went through. It's only happened to me once, but I know what I went through. And I've kept it like your photographs, right? I keep my experience to myself. And I want to hear what others went through so I could find out if they are, if it was a real experience or not. But is there contact experiences where you are being held motionless, not because of the REM sleep, but because there is something physical there that is holding you down and is keeping you from reacting?
Yes, certainly. And one of the questions that we asked on one of our research studies was, first, have you experienced the symptoms of sleep paralysis? We listed them. And 74% of experiencers said yes, 90% of our abductee group. We asked then, were you awake? Did you see non-human entities in your room, and then did you become paralyzed? In that group, 36% of the experiencers said yes, 60% of the abductee group. So more of the abductee group is having this happen, where they actually see that light in their room. They actually see the entities. They're awake, and then they become paralyzed. Some even fight against that. I wrote about that in the alien abduction files, and an experience that Jenny Henderson had, where her husband actually got up out of bed when this activity was happening in the room, and they just laid him down, and he was out cold immediately. She wanted to escape. She was having a fight or flight response, and this paralysis crept through her body, and then she was paralyzed and motionless, but she had also had something happen where she was no longer feeling that fight or flight response. She was now comfortable and calm.
Why is it that some experiences are terrifying, some are completely benevolent and peaceful? You know, is it because it's two different extraterrestrial species that are doing this? Is it up to the experiencer or the abductee? You know, because the community is divided on this issue.
Yes, and you know, I have worked with an experiencer. It was in a multiple abduction, 3 people taken at the same time, out at night, looking into the sky. There's a craft that comes down and so quickly that they don't know what's happening. There's a blue light that's coming out of it, and the next thing they know, they're standing on the wet ground. All of the equipment they were holding is on the ground. They go into the house, and one of the experiencer's spouses says, "Where have you been for the past 2 hours? I've been looking for you." Well, these people were very distressed, yet I used quantum healing hypnosis, that technique, on one of them. It was the case I was investigating. And come to find out, she had been picked up and contacted by the benevolent human types. But it was not knowing what happened that caused the trauma. I think that, you know, some people, if you do remember, and it's something that is causing a great deal of fear, I can understand why you would be having that traumatic experience as well. But I think that our perception of what is occurring is often colored by our emotional reaction to it. And we know that certainly not all of these entities are kind, not all of them are respectful. Some of them seem to care very little about humans, whereas there are others who care a great deal. It doesn't matter if it's Greys. There are Greys who are kind and caring, and there are Greys that traumatize people. I don't know if they're all the same, and if it's the person's emotional reaction to what is occurring or not. But, and it's the stage at where a person is as they're working through this. You go through stages and one of those stages involves fear and anger. And, maybe that's where that person is at that point. But eventually, it seems that most people, as time goes on, become less fearful. They're accustomed to having this happen. The more they can understand about what has actually happened, the less fearful they become. And eventually, some of them can actually communicate with these non-humans and can ask questions, telepathically and receive answers. So, it was funny, in our study, we asked about the demeanor of the non-humans. 48% of the experiencers said businesslike, 65% of the abductee group. Were they evil? 11%. Were they hostile or sadistic? Less than 6%. Were they kind? Between 20 and 30% said they were kind. They were friendly. So a lot of it has to do with human perception and with the type of entity they encounter.
I have a list of questions here that have come in during the show. I'm going to get some of these out of the way. This is from Scott. Speaking on this subject right here, he says, Jimmy, did Barney Hill ever find peace in the end, or was he continuously in fear?
Barney did find some peace after he saw Dr. Benjamin Simon, underwent hypnotherapy and therapy for a period of 6 months. He seemed to feel a lot better about what had happened to him, but this was always to remain confidential. There was a violation of confidentiality by a friend of Betty's, who was a UFO investigator that Betty trusted and confided in. This woman spoke to a newspaper reporter. It was revealed to the public in 5 newspaper articles in the Boston Traveler in late October of 1965. And when that occurred, Barney again experienced a new kind of trauma. Barney was very committed to the civil rights movement. Barney was a very upstanding individual. He was active in politics. We were even invited to Lyndon Johnson's inauguration, and the 3 of us went together. Barney had been appointed to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights as a state advisory committee member. All of that changed when Barney was revealed to the public as an abductee taken by aliens. It changed him again.
And, man, I'm looking at the clock. We're going to run out of time. I've got all these questions. Can I get you to do overtime? Can we do some overtime after the break?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Kathleen. You weren't going to say no. I knew better than that.
I'm having so much fun. How can I say no?
Is it, growing up, because obviously you knew your aunt and uncle before and after, how did that affect you to see this change in your Uncle Barney?
I was extremely concerned about Barney, and I was 13 when it happened. I was a teenager, mid-teens to late teens, as they were going through all of the aftershock of not only finding out what happened through hypnosis, separate hypnosis sessions, but also after the violation of confidentiality. It was extremely distressing to watch Betty and Barney go through this. And as a family, we attempted to help them. When those newspaper articles appeared in the Boston Traveler, Betty and Barney drove down to my grandparents' home, and we met as a family to decide what to do next.
And what did you do?
We agreed that since the cat was out of the bag, that Betty and Barney should agree to speak for the first time to a public audience about this. They did so at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Dover, New Hampshire, and they were introduced by the public information officer from Pease Air Force Base.
What did you think? This is from Dan. What are your thoughts on Project Blue Book and the way that they portrayed Betty as a black woman?
He's talking about the show on TV.
Yes.
That was the last episode of Project Blue Book that I watched.
I bet it
I refused to watch it again after that episode because that program in no way resembled Betty's and Barney's experiences. Betty and Barney holding a gun on Alan Hynek and on the Air Force officer. It was completely absurd, ludicrous. I think it was outrageous. And they had contacted me to tell me they were doing a segment on Betty and Barney, and I said, I have all of the files. I can give you anything you want. I'm a stickler for accuracy. I'd be happy to help you out. And they said, oh, we don't need any help, obviously.
The way that they went about it, not only with the Betty and Barney case, but all of the cases, everything was given this artistic license to go into sensationalism when it's in direct contrast to the way that they introduce and outro the show. These are the official case files of Project Blue Book. Everything you are about to see is real, right? And they do all of that. Well, the audience out there, Kathleen, you know this, that isn't familiar with the UFO subject or Betty and Barney Hill or any of these cases are going to think that that's exactly how it went down, right?
Yes, and I was wondering, is this a new form of disinformation?
Right.
That was my first thought.
Did you blow a gasket? Just tell me the truth.
Yes, I blew a gasket.
I'm watching the Betty and Barney, and he's firing off rounds on an Air Force base in the office. Now surrounded by military police. He's now kidnapped J. Allen Hynek, right, and holding him against his will. And I'm thinking, who is writing this crap? But people are believing it.
Unfortunately. And so I guess I have to work even harder to inform the public of the truth.
It was, I can't believe, and they're going to come out with another season. They're going to do another season of that crap. But,
unfortunately.
Yeah, if they, I'm going to say this, as an entertainment show, if they took out the front and back, that this is all official. I feel sorry for the Hynek family too, as well. I mean, they just took this to so many different directions. But if it was just entertainment value, funny, ha, okay, all right, it's a watchable show, but you can't represent it as fact. And that I think is wrong and is doing a disservice and to the historical record and the families and friends that are directly involved with this show. And that's the part that's uncool. Very uncool.
Yeah, absolutely.
All
I
right.
agree.
Let's take a break right here, and we'll come back. We'll do some overtime. I've got a bunch of questions here from the audience, and we'll get to all of those. Our guest tonight is Kathleen Marden. We are talking about her new book, Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You've Been Abducted. I'm holding it up to the camera right there. You can head over to Kathleen's website and you can get yourself an autographed copy. This is Fade to Black. I'm yours, Jimmy Church. More with Kathleen after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, Fade to Black. What an amazing conversation tonight with Kathleen Marden. You knew it was going to happen. Going into some overtime here, discussing her amazing new book. It is called Extraterrestrial Contact. And you can get yourself an autographed copy over at Kathleen's website. The links are at jimmychurchradio.com. I've got a bunch of questions from the audience. Are you ready to go rapid fire?
I am.
Let's do this. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to start from the latest. They're clicking by here. Okay. Has anyone noticed that Bob Lazar's briefings said that they were from Zeta Reticuli, and Betty and Barney's experience says the same thing? Is that not confirmation? Has Kathleen made that connection? And if so, what conclusions has she drawn from it?
Well, I have made that connection, but Marjorie Fish identified the two most prominent stars on Betty's star map as Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2 back in 1971. Anyone could have heard that information and stated that they were from Zeta Reticuli after that.
This is a point that gets kind of forgotten in the Betty and Barney Hill story. The Marjorie Fish, the star map, the aspect of this. Marjorie Fish was a teacher, and she took, I'll never forget this when I had read this originally, and I was just a kid, and I was like, holy crap. Okay, there you go. Now we've got something here. Marjorie Fish took it upon herself to do a 3D model of the stars. That's it.
23.
Yeah.
23 3D models.
And she puts this together, and she goes and somehow gets a copy of Betty's star map that she drew, I believe, under hypnosis, right?
She drew it as a result of a post-hypnotic suggestion that she would be able to draw it if she remembered it and could draw it accurately, and it didn't bother her too badly.
And so, which was a star map of the trade routes that these beings were doing. This is where they routinely went, right?
That is correct. And when Betty was on the craft, after her examination, she began to trust and lose her fear of the escort who was with her, because he had taken her pain away when a needle was plunged into her navel by the examiner. And so she was finished, she's dressed, and she starts to look around the room. And she says to this one that she called the leader, I know you're not from around here. Where is your home port? And so he produced a kind of a three-dimensional image of this star map with stars that were connected and a few others that were not. There were many stars in the background, she said. She only put a few on the star map when she drew them. And some of those stars were connected by solid lines, and there were 5 of those lines connecting Zeta Reticuli 1 and Zeta Reticuli 2. And the solid lines represented trade routes, whereas there were dotted lines which represented expeditions to some of those stars.
And the point that makes this so incredible is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Zeta Reticuli at that time it was behind the sun. We hadn't sent out satellites yet to check out that part of the Milky Way. And Marjorie Fish put this together almost 10 years later, and she went back to Betty's star map, lined it up with hers, and went, she's talking about Zeta Reticuli, which Betty could not have possibly have known about. Am I right about this?
No, yes, you are. Betty couldn't possibly have known about Zeta Reticuli. It can be observed only from the southern hemisphere, and it is a very, very dim star at that. It's in the constellation the Net.
Fascinating.
And what was so fascinating to me is that Marjorie built those 23 models. She was so persistent, going to the university, copying the distance data and all of the characteristics of those stars out 54 light years, and still didn't find a match until there was new distance data in the 1971 catalog. And she then put some stars onto the map that hadn't been there previously. She rearranged some things according to the new distance data, and there was the match. And the interesting thing about those is that all of them were believed to be sun-like stars, even though only 5% of the stars in that section of our galaxy are considered to be sun-like. And all of the stars on Betty's map were sun-like.
Next question.
Pretty amazing.
Yes, it is. It is. I'm looking at the star map here. Thank you for that, Brian. I'm looking at the original picture, which still freaks me out to this day. This is from Eddie. Eddie says, "Hey, JC, could you please ask Kathleen which case, sighting, etc. she feels is the most important to the history of ufology?"
My goodness, that there are so many. There are so many that are very important. I can't name just one. We've learned so much, from Betty and Barney to Travis Walton. That was very important. Charlie Hickson and Calvin Parker. There were 3 women in Kentucky where there were witnesses and had an experience that was publicized early on. There was the Allagash abduction in the Allagash of Maine. There's the Linda Cortillo case from New York City, and I know her and see her about once a year. And I do believe that is a true case, even though there has been a concerted effort to slander her and debunk that case.
Was that the case with the United Nations?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's an amazing, amazing case.
Yes.
Okay, this comes from Planet King. In the last Contact in the Desert, was Kathleen Marden the one doing the little theater room conversations I attended?
Little theater room.
That's what it says. Doing the little theater room conversations I attended.
I guess I was not, because I was in the large theater on a panel. I did a group hypnosis session just to give people an idea of what hypnosis was like.
You did a group hypnosis?
Yes.
I wanted to be there for that.
I'm going to be doing it at the International UFO Congress Conference too, down in Phoenix in the next week.
Yeah, next week. You're going to hypnotize the whole world. Are you going to bring somebody up on stage and make them like bark like a dog?
I don't do that kind of hypnosis. I'm going to take them on a regression to a pleasant experience in their life, and I'm going to do a little healing hypnosis session with them as well.
That is so cool.
And I did that kind of thing at Contact in the Desert. I did a lecture, a presentation, but I didn't sit in a small room and talk to people except for at my vendor table.
Right.
So
right.
I really don't know. I guess I wasn't the one.
Daryl Sims said to me, with my little experience, he said, Jimmy, you need to do a regression. You need to go back to that moment. Something may have happened, and you should be aware of it. I think you should find out. And I said, no, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. The experience freaked me out enough, and I don't want to go back. I don't want to visit it. If something happened, it happened. I just don't want to know about it. I really just want to leave it where it is. Is that okay?
That is perfectly fine. And if you do find out and you don't really want to find out, it could cause problems in your life. You might become fearful. You might think that, well, gee, this is going to happen again, and now I have all of this information, and I'm fearful now. So, yeah, you don't have to learn about it if you don't want to. Do what feels comfortable to you. We're all different.
Yeah, I just want to let it go. I do. Mm-hmm. The part that I remember, that's good enough. That's good enough.
And that's what Barney wanted to do. Barney wanted to forget it, but Betty wouldn't let him forget it, and that's what caused so much trouble for him.
Well, I don't know if I've told you this before, but I was living, I just moved into a house in Pasadena. It's 1984, and, I'm 21 years old. And I'm walking through the house. The house is empty. No furniture. I've got suitcases. Right? That's it. And it's a 5-bedroom house. And in one of the front bedrooms, I had kind of chosen this back bedroom. But in the front bedroom, I'm just walking through, and I see these on this top shelf. The house is empty. I need to emphasize that there's nothing in the house. I go in this bedroom, and on the top, in the closet, on the shelf, are 2 books on the back of this shelf above where you hang your clothes. Right, there's a shelf, and I grabbed the 2 books. One of them, An Interrupted Journey. Right?
That's so.
Yeah. And the other one was Betty Andreessen. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So the Andreessen affair. And I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool. I didn't have a TV. I didn't have a radio, but now I got a couple of books to read. And, so I go back to the house and I started reading An Interrupted Journey. And that's right. The perfect epiphany story, right? That's the life-changing event. And going through that and reading Barney's sessions in the book, and the way that I know that Fowler, these were direct transcriptions, and this, and it moved me. I felt Barney's fear and his trauma. I think that everybody resonated with Barney and what he went through, didn't they? Yes,
they did. And if you listen to the hypnosis tapes, there is a little bit on YouTube of Barney, and everyone identifies with that and feels sympathy.
It's difficult. It's difficult to listen to. I mean, he's a grown man. This isn't a child, right, or anything like that. This is a grown man reacting this way, and I think we all felt for him. It was traumatic. Traumatic's even a mild word to use for it. This question comes in from Dew Sky. Jimmy, please ask Kathleen her take on why the powers that shouldn't be, it is so important and necessary to ridicule, to trivialize, to marginalize, and officially dismiss experiencers. What are they afraid of?
Again, I think that the reason for this is that there is a federal policy, a government policy, that we are not going to address this question. There's nothing that we can do to stop it, and we can't acknowledge it because militarily we are helpless. And that pertains to every country in this world. We are all helpless to defend against that. So what do? You simply ignore it.
Somebody wanted to, this comes from Scott, about what about if there are marks on ankles? Does that signify anything?
It can. It varies. I have seen marks on ankles of individuals who are having contact with negative interdimensional entities from the astral realm, where there are like claw marks on their ankles where they're being held upside down and taunted and tortured. That's another thing. But there can be marks on people's ankles too. You know, if they've been taken, sometimes they use the foot area to insert an implant, and then they do have intelligence, and so they can travel up the body to wherever they want them to be and rest in that position.
How many experiencers, what is the ratio of men to women? It seems, and I ask this because we look at some of the, the more publicized cases, certainly Calvin Parker, and you have Travis, you have Betty and Barney, you have Rendlesham as another example of contact. There's not an abduction involved, but of course there was direct contact. But what's the ratio?
It's about 50-50, according to the research studies that I have worked on, which is very interesting. That includes Freeze study of 4,000 people and MUFON study of 516 people. About 50-50.
And when you see attendees at conferences, and we've been discussing this this week, the attendees at conferences, the attendees, not the speakers, the attendees, I think there's more women than men. I think it might be 60-40. Rita says she thinks it's about 50-50. It's not a male-dominated subject, is it?
Well, I have to tell you that the male researchers, such as Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs, believed that there were more women being taken. But now that there are women researchers, such as myself, we're finding that there are many, many men, more men coming to us, in fact, than women. So, maybe it's just a matter of who people go to see.
Or who's willing to step forward and talk about it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. What's next for you?
Oh, well, this weekend I'm going to be at the Exeter UFO Festival in Exeter, New Hampshire, where I'll be speaking. And then on Tuesday, I'm flying down to Phoenix, hopefully, barring a hurricane preventing me from flying. But I'll be down there to do experiencer support groups, to do a group hypnosis session, and to do a workshop for experiencers at the International UFO Congress Conference. Then in early October, I am going to be working on a cruise ship, and you can go to UFOcruise.com to get more information about that, at least from San Diego. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We have a lot of great speakers who are going to be there, and if you go or you decide to register, please mention my name. And then we're having in November a UFO Expo. I think it's called UFO Con in Central Florida, near Orlando, and I'll be speaking there as well.
Yeah, fantastic, Kathleen. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next book and, of course, hanging out with you, what you have done for this community, and, of course, Stanton, too, as well. And I can't let you get away tonight without saying thank you to Stanton and the work that you two did together over the years, too, as well. We miss him so much. And
I do, too.
Yeah. Keep doing your thing, and I look forward to our next conversation. Thank you so much.
I do as well. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kathleen. And Kathleen's website is right there at jimmychurchradio.com. You can head straight over. Her book, you can order it right now, Extraterrestrial Contact. If you order from her website, you get an autographed copy. This is Fade to Black. I'm going to take a quick break. I'll be right back after this. Stay with us. Welcome back. Fade to Black. Tomorrow night, Dr. Lynn Katai is here. And we're going to be discussing the Phoenix Lights. And this is the thing for me about the Phoenix Lights. I was in Phoenix that week. And I was at the Hard Rock Cafe that night. And the reason why I remember all of this is, and we were out on... anyway, that part of it doesn't matter. But I'm in Phoenix and on business, and I get back. It was a Friday night, and I get back. I land at Burbank Airport. I get home with my luggage, drop my luggage, and I went into the living room, turned on the TV, and it was on the news. And the news pops up, and it says UFO sighting last night in Phoenix. And I'm looking at the screen. It was, the video that we're so familiar with, with the silhouette of the mountains. And I'm looking at that, and I'm like, say what? And I had, I just arrived from Phoenix. I was there. I didn't see it, and I look back and I think about that so much. That extraordinary, and it was all over the city, right? And I did not see it. And I don't know why, with all the driving and everything that I was doing, I did not see it. Neither did anybody else that I was with. But I was there that night, and I keep just replaying it in my mind. I know exactly where I was and what I was doing, and how I missed one of the greatest sightings in history. It still blows my mind, and that's why I enjoy having Dr. Lynn Katai on with us each night to recount this. I'm not going to go and repeat this again tomorrow night, that I was there and missed it, because it bums me out. So I'm just going to let you know that now. I was there. I missed it. I still can't believe it. I remember sitting all night at a table with my friends, and we didn't see it. Rob Halford was with me that night. Alice Cooper we were at a record release party. Alice Cooper was there. Stevie Nicks was there. None of us saw it. None of us looked up. I still can't believe it. So tomorrow night, Dr. Lynn Katai, it will be night number 4 of our Amazing Women Week here on Fade to Black. What a great night. No fader night tomorrow night. This marks, for whatever reason, this is 3 weeks in a row with no fader night. But we will have it next week, I promise. We've got a great week lined up for next week, too, by the way. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. I want to thank Kathleen Marden tonight for another amazing conversation. Fade to Black's executive producer is Rita Camarian. The show is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee, Dennis, and Bob. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vitola, Mark D. Kovar. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and syndication is KGRA, The Planet. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2019 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Thank you, Kathleen Marden. Tomorrow night, Dr. Lynn Katai. Until then, everybody be safe. Go Backley Tappy.